I'll tell you when to go. It is preparing the live stream, setting up the webinar, redirecting. Live.
All right. So it's Wednesday. It's the 28th. I had to double check that, but welcome everyone to our monthly Vistaprint Chat. And I'm so excited about our featured guest. She is from Vox Law. Her name is Andrea. She will tell you all about herself. But I wanted to tell you a little bit about, well, I should probably bring it back a little bit. Let's start over. Happy early birthday, Canada. 150 years. It's a pretty stellar. You look good for 150 too. So yeah, let's start with that. And I would love for you guys to also tell us what you're doing to celebrate Canada 150. So we'll be kicking it off with our sponsors of this chat, Vistaprint, on Friday, because they are in town all week at City Hall in Toronto, and they're part of the festivities. So we're going to join them Friday to kick it off. But for now, our party is here for the next hour, as Andrea is going to talk to you about your business and about the things that you can do from a legal standpoint, not really legal advice, but legal standpoint for your business. So I'm going to hand it over to Andrea. I will be here back and forth. We'll do some Q&A, and definitely feel free to ask questions in the feed, like, share, have everyone join the party. It's a better party when there are more people involved, right? And yeah, definitely get involved in this chat. Ask questions because Andrea is here to answer them. So enough of me. Andrea.
Good evening, everyone. So as Renia said, my name is Andrea Henry of Vox Law, and I've been a business and tax lawyer for over 10 years now. And I am so thrilled to be doing the chat this evening because when I was a little baby lawyer, I started off doing commercial litigation, which is when businesses sue each other. And time after time after time, I get so frustrated because people would be in court for things that they really could have easily avoided had they put the right contracts or the right structures, or just thought about it a little bit right at the beginning. And so as I grew, I thought, what can I do to really help? What can I do that's going to make a difference? And working with bigger companies who've got teams of lawyers and very sophisticated doesn't bring the same joy to me. So I feel like I'm at home because I'm a Canadian small businesswoman myself, and I think it's really important to support those of us that are managing our families and managing business and are following our dreams. So I'm here to help protect those who move our country forward by following their dreams. And so I really encourage you to ask as many questions as possible. I won't be giving legal advice. And if you have a question that's really, really specific, like I once asked someone to do a contract for me in 2015, and if it's really, really specific, then I'm happy to do consultations after. But please ask away. No question is too small. And I'm here to really make sure that you get as much benefit out of this for your business as possible. So I'll start off. I don't know yet whether there are any questions, but I'll start off with sort of the basics of when you're looking at a business. So most people start off by looking at a business concept, and they look at a business name. And that's the most exciting part of it. You're filled with creativity and you want to go out there. And a business name is a hard thing to decide on because it's what represents you in the marketplace. It's how people know to buy from you as opposed to the other person selling your similar good or service. So it's really important when you're thinking about your business name to think about whether it's distinctive enough that you can protect it and it can really be just yours. And that's the issue of trademark. So if you're thinking of a business name, if you're thinking of a tagline, if you're thinking of a logo that's really going to set you apart in the marketplace and make sure that people know it's you, it's important that it be distinctive. So let's think of an example. If you wanted to provide really high-end fancy eyeglasses, you may think of a name and say, the eyeglass shop, or, eyeglasses are us. There's a difference between the eyeglass doctor or the eyeglass shop and eyeglasses are us, or Dwaynia's eyeglasses, or because it has to be distinctive. It has to be something that not everyone else is using. So bear that in mind when you're choosing a name. You want to make sure that whether you market at the very beginning of your business or whether you wait a while, that is something that's distinctive and can set you apart and that you can protect it. The other thing is a lot of us are marketing these days by content. And so we post on Facebook, we post on Instagram, we do blogs, we do videos, and that's really how our audience gets to know about us and gets to know about our services and our products. Can you imagine what happens if you put all of this wonderful information that you spent loads of time working on out into the internet and someone copies your stuff? And I don't know if any one of you out there, it's a common complaint that I hear that someone's done a logo that looks a lot like mine, or someone's copied almost verbatim from a blog post that I did or an Instagram post. So it's important to really think about the value of what you're putting out there and how important it is to your business. And anything that's really important to your business is worth protecting. So Dwayne, did you have any questions about, has anything coming as yet in terms of trademarking or logo protection or anything of that nature?
1 second.
So while we're waiting to see whether any questions are coming in, I'll move on to the next part. And what a lot of people ask right after they've started or chosen a name is, should I incorporate? Should I hold a business as a sole proprietor, which means the business is me and there's no separation between me and the business, or should I incorporate? If I am going into business with another person or other persons, should I form a partnership or should I form a corporation with them and we all be shareholders? So I'll go through it a little bit step by step. A sole proprietorship is the most basic and in some respects the easiest way to start a business. It is simply registering your business name and that's it. You are the business. There's no other legal requirement. There are no other formalities that you need to go through. You can start running your business as a sole proprietor. A partnership is like a sole proprietorship with more than one person. So you and your friends or you and your family decide that you're going to go into business and each of you are going to pool your assets or pool your money, or someone's going to put in money and someone else is going to put in sweat equity or knowledge or the equipment or the inventory, and you're all going to carry on this business together. The advantages to both partnership and sole proprietorship are, one, it's simpler to set up. It doesn't require going through the legal process of incorporating. They can be very useful if you are still working full-time or even part-time for someone else. If you've got income from somewhere else and you've got a partnership or a sole proprietorship and that business in the first year or so makes a loss, because quite often businesses do, you can then set off your loss in your business against the income that you receive from your job, which you cannot do with a corporation. So that's a major benefit. But one of the major drawbacks of operating as a partnership or as a sole proprietor is that you are your business. And if something happens, if something goes wrong in the business, if someone has a claim against you, if you've got a disgruntled employee, if you use someone else's logo when they've trademarked it, whatever claim there is against a business is a claim against you personally. And that means your house, your car, your bank account, all of your assets are available to satisfy any judgment against you. That is a serious concern, especially if you're in a business that is at a higher risk for having a claim, or if you're in a business which is not easily insured. So there's a difference between a business, like they're axe throwing studios in Toronto, or studios where people do training for parkour and other things that are likely to leave you injured. Though if you're running a business of that type, your insurance is probably going to be high, and there's a much higher chance that something's going to go wrong. If you're a coach and you're providing any services that are more advisory, you're probably more easily insured, and there's less likely that someone will bring a claim against you out of your services. And so you may not be as interested in restricting your liability in that case. But you also have to think of what happens if you, for example, lease an office or lease a warehouse space or a manufacturing space for your business. And for whatever reason, you're not able to pay, or there's some type of damage to the property. Again, if there's no separation between you and the business, your personal assets are available to satisfy any judgment that someone has got against you. So that's something that you need to bear in mind. The corporation, conventional wisdom is that you only incorporate when you're making more money than you need to live. So I'm bad at math, so I'm just going to use really simple figures. If you make $100,000 in a year, but you have to spend $99,000 in expenses and to make sure that you can pay your own rent or mortgage and buy food, you don't get any of the tax savings that come from having a corporation, because you don't have any money left over at the end of the year. So traditional, as I said, conventional wisdom is wait until you're making enough that there's money left over in the corporation. And the reason why there's tax savings is if you operate your business as a partnership or a sole proprietorship, whatever you earn in a year is considered your personal income for that year. CRA doesn't care whether you've actually put $20,000 or $30,000 aside to invest in your business next year. They don't care. It all counts for your taxes in that year. And once your business starts making more money, it pushes your personal tax rate up. On the other hand, a corporation, approved small business, approved Canadian private corporation, which most of you would have, as of this year, the corporate tax rate is 10%, which is a lot different from the 40 to 50% marginal rate that you get at the higher levels of income. So with a corporation, if you make $100,000 and you spend $60,000, you've got $40,000 left over. You pay corporate tax at the rate of 10%, so you pay $4,000, and you've got $36,000 left in the corporation that you can reinvest, that you can dividend out to your shareholders. And I'll back up a little bit just to make sure that I'm clear. When you've got a corporation, it's a separate legal entity. It's a separate legal person. As much as you and I are walking about, all of our rights and responsibilities and duties are now that of the corporation. And the law treats it as if it was a separate person. So your business now exists outside of you. And now you can have ownership in your business. And the way that you have ownership in your business is by issuing shares. And a share is, if you imagine a pie, and you cut a pie into 10 pieces, and each person takes a piece of the pie. A share in a corporation is like a share of the pie. It's just a unit of ownership. The way that shareholders get a benefit out of the money that the corporation has made is through dividends. So dividends are a way that corporation can pass on the surplus after it's paid its expenses and after it's paid tax. It can pass on its surplus to its shareholders. So in the example that I gave earlier, corporation makes $100,000, spends $60,000 in expenses. There's $40,000 left over. 10% of $40,000 is $4,000. 40 take away 4 is 36,000. You've left with 36,000, and you can now dividend that surplus out if you choose to your shareholders. That will come in useful, and I'll talk about that a little bit more about how you can use dividends and play around with when you dividend and to who in order to have tax advantages. But if you're not making a lot of money, those tax advantages are minimal or are non-existent. But there are lots of other advantages for having a corporation. So there's the prestige of having a corporation. There are some projects that you're not going to be able to tender for unless you're incorporated. There's also the ease with which you can get investment. So as a small business owner, if you're a sole proprietor, generally speaking, you have to borrow money. You may borrow first from, your partner and your family and your school friends, but eventually they get tired of lending to you and you go to the bank. And the bank will look at your personal situation. They'll look at your assets, they'll look at your credit. They'll look at all of your personal situations and decide whether they're going to lend to you or not. But no one can really invest in the business because the business is you. If you've got a corporation, you can say to someone else, I can't repay you. I can't guarantee that I'll repay you, but I can give you a piece of my company, a piece of the pie, a share of my company for $10,000. And at the end of the year, we're going to use that $10,000 to generate income in the business. We'll have a surplus at the end of the year, and you'll benefit by receiving a part of that surplus. Or not, if the business doesn't make the profit that you expect it to. But in that case, you don't have to pay the person back. It's not a loan. You're not required to pay back. The person who is invested in the corporation takes the risk. So by incorporating, even if you're at the point where you're not making any money, particularly if you're at the point if you're not making any money, that's a way to get investment into your business. You form a corporation and you can offer shares. You can also offer a different type of share. So the most common type of shares are common shares, as the name suggests. And those are what everyone thinks about when they think about shares. It's just a piece of the pie. But you can also use these wonderful things, at least they're wonderful to me, things called preferred shares. And those are almost a mix of ownership and debt. Because with a preferred share, what you say is, okay, I can't promise to absolutely pay back the bank. I don't have any assets. There's nothing that I can pledge to you, but I can promise you that I'll pay you back at 5% of your investment. And maybe at the end of 3 years, I'll buy back your shares, or maybe you want to be a full-time owner, but you can find a way to offer those preferred shares. You promise a certain percentage of return, and then you can raise investment in your company without having to give up control of the company, because preferred shares carry no voting rights as common shares do. And so you control. No one will come to, and if any of you have heard about a hostile takeover, no one can do that to you if you own all of the voting shares. So you can be really creative with a corporation in terms of how you raise money. Do you have any questions, or for anyone that's listening, any questions from anything that I've said so far? Has that sort of touched a nerve? Is anyone going through something similar out there? I'm happy to answer any questions. Okay. What am I doing here?
So I have a question. I'm just going to interject. You were talking about all the options when it comes to shareholding. Is this something that you would sit down with your lawyer, like someone like you, and draft up all these contracts prior to even going to do the incorporating of the business? What step comes first?
Right. I mean, it really depends on what type of business you have. So if you are a solopreneur and you're running a relatively small business, you're not looking to bring on any investors, you're not really looking to bring on any debt, you're going to grow your business organically, then the first thing is to make sure that you've got proper contracts in place and to make sure that you've protected your brand, your position in the marketplace. If you are intending to become more quickly a larger business, if you need to bring on investment. So like a lot of the times there's a split between services and bricks and mortar businesses. So services are much easier to start because essentially these days, for a service, all you need is yourself, a computer, and a good Wi-Fi connection, and you can start a service business. But if you are starting a bakery, if you're starting a restaurant, if you're starting a hair salon, you probably can't just do that on your own unless you've got really good asset and the bank is willing to lend to you. And then you put your own assets at risk if the business fails. And so I think a lot depends on the type of business you're in and also how quickly you want to grow and whether you want to grow by taking on investors or not. Because if you do want to grow quickly and you do need a lot of investment, then if the banks say no, the only other way really to raise money is to bring on investors. And the only way to do that is to incorporate.
So in terms of the contract,
Mm-hmm.
Are there contracts available online? What are the differences between getting a generic contract and trying to doctor it up and play lawyer versus going for some legitimate legal help?
Right. And I'm glad you asked that. So very often people will say that, well, I can just type in sample, employment contract or a sample client contract, and I'll just copy and paste and make the changes that I think are necessary, and I'll be fine. The issue with that is when you Google, or even if you go on Law Depot or LegalZoom, they don't know your business. And they don't know what particular issue you're dealing with. And if you just take a random contract off of the interwebs and you say, yep, this sounds like it'll work, you don't know what business or what situation that dealt with. And so lawyers use it as well. We have things called boilerplate agreements. So we do not create a contract from scratch each time someone comes to us. So we have the agreements, but our agreements are pages and pages and pages of agreements, and you take out and put in and change things around as is necessary for that person's situation. I'll think of an example. So you may go online and say, I need an employee contract. Or better yet, I need an independent contractor. I'll use one from one of my clients. I need an independent contractor agreement. So I go online and I Google it and I find one and I put the name where it says name and put the name of the company where it says company and put the hours and whatever else. And I think I've got a contract. But a fundamental question is the person really an independent contractor? Maybe they're an employee. And so if you haven't at least had a consultation with someone who knows the difference between those two, you may think that your contract covers you. You may have a year of this person providing services. And if the relationship turns sour at the end, all of a sudden you now have an employee. And that employee is taking you to the labor board. And now you are responsible for CPP and EI and all those other things that you didn't take out of the compensation that you provided to the person you thought was your independent contractor. So I'm not knocking them. I understand that quite often people don't go to lawyers because it's a cost, right? And I run my own business myself. I have no other income other than this business. So I understand what it's like to have to juggle the 500 things that you should do when you've only got money for 2 things. So I understand that, and I think it's admirable that people are trying to protect themselves. It's just that those things sometimes give you a false sense of security. So my advice would be, if many lawyers will provide free consultations where you can at least get a second opinion, or really a first legal opinion on what it is that you may need in your contract. The other thing is, if you've got an idea of what you want and you've already got a sample contract, you can go to a lawyer and have a lawyer for much less money review the contract for you and point out, what's fine and can stay, and maybe where you need to do some amendments, as opposed to paying someone to do the entire thing. But it is important. And if you have to choose sort of 2 or 3 contracts, definitely your client contract, your employee contract. And if you have and I think I put this in the blog, and I say this, I'm almost evangelical about it. If you go into partnership with anyone, if they're your husband, if it's your friend from grade 2, it doesn't matter. You have to have an agreement. And quite often, and unfortunately, it often is women who say, well, I don't want to ask them to sign an agreement because if I do, then they'll think I don't trust them. I don't want it to be awkward. So it'll be fine. It'll be fine. No, the relationships that can, like business is hard, right? Like entrepreneur stuff is wonderful and we're all entrepreneurs, but it's hard. And if you can't have an honest conversation with that person about what possibly could happen, you have to really consider whether you can be in business with that person, because those conversations will get, there'll be more difficult conversations than that. The other thing is, when you're entering into a partnership agreement, it's a negotiation. It's not, this is my agreement, my lawyer said you need to sign this, otherwise I'm not going into business with you. It's let's sit down and talk about, what do we both want? What do we both expect out of this partnership? What happens if 2 years from now you decide that you really want to go be a nun in Nepal and you don't want to run the business anymore? What happens if 4 years from now I get cancer? I'm here knocking on wood, but suppose one of you gets sick. One of you goes on more maternity leave. So at the time you start, you think that maybe both of you are done having children, and then one of you changes your mind and is going to be out for the next 2 to 3 years raising young kids. So these are not things there's anyone's fault, and they're not bad things. It's just things that you have to think about and put a plan in place for before they happen. And I always say the time to make an agreement is when everybody is happy and when everyone is friends with each other. It's the same thing with couples, right? The time to do a prenup is before the marriage, when you're still in love, because that's when you're more likely to be fair. If you wait until things get bad to then try to decide what's going to happen, it's already too late. And a lot of partnerships end up in court. And it's the end of the business. It's the end of a relationship. It really can be completely life altering. So I say that to scare you. I try to talk not so much about scaring, and I was talking more about investment and trying to grow your business. But on that part, I do want to scare you, because it is really important that you have that in place. Client contracts are really important because a good client contract gets you paid. I don't know how many of you out there, I can't see, unfortunately, but I bet if I ask the people who are watching, do you have problems collecting? And most of the people who don't have problems collecting, it's because they have a very clear client agreement. It may be not that the client signs on the dotted line, but somewhere on their website or on their terms of and conditions or their quote sheet, there's something which sets out very clearly what the process is for payment, what the process is for cancellation, what the process is for refunds. It's really important that you are upfront with your clients about what that is. So there are no surprises when you send an invoice and you're waiting to see whether the person's going to pay or not, because you haven't made it clear that you expect payment within 5 days. And your client thinks, oh, well, everyone else I know gives me 30 days credit, so I just assume that I'd pay you that. So it's really important. So contracts are not things to be afraid of, and they're not things that are going to necessarily rupture relationships. I think as long as we frame them in a really positive manner, say that this is important. Sorry. that this is important to make sure that we don't have any that we don't have any misunderstandings, and that the relationship goes well and we all make money and be happy together. So, Duania, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, that was a quick half hour. I'm going to tell you that much. Believe it or not, it's already 8:30.
Wow.
To give you a little breather, I'm going to interject just with a few things that's coming up with Canadian small business women. And just so you know, we'll be posting some links beneath this chat, not only about things that we have coming up, but also about things that Andrea has coming up and offers that she will have for the viewers. So you'll be able to see links. I have just posted a link to her blog that she posted. She is a contributor to the Canadian Small Business Women blog. So there's one about the top 5 legal questions that every business owner should ask. And I just posted a link to that if you'd like to read it. And there'll be links for a 30-minute consult. So am I right? Yes. A 30-minute consult with her. And to keep in touch with Andrea, we'll put a link so that you can sign up for her email list as well. And then there'll be a link to her summer special. She has something really nice going on for everyone. So, thank you, Andrea, for that. So we'll be posting that throughout the chat. We still have a little bit under a half hour left. With that, I also want to add some things. Like, I know I say Vistaprint does support us quite a bit with this chat and with other things that Canadian Small Business Women has going on, but they will be cross-posting this chat on their Facebook page. And we are really excited because our next chat is not only going to be live on Facebook, but it's going to be with a live audience because we're hosting it at the Vistaprint studio downtown on King Street in Toronto. It's the first of its kind in terms of that studio location in the world, and they chose Toronto to open it. So we'll have an opportunity. We only have room for 40 guests. So stay tuned. I will post a link probably tonight or tomorrow on this chat and also on our Facebook page for tickets. It's complimentary to attend this. So you can meet and greet, and you can also check out the studio, and you can talk to our featured expert, who's going to be Sasha Pinto. Just a little secret there, just thrown out. So we'll be doing that next month, the last Wednesday of the month, like we always do. And I'll keep you posted of all the other events that we have going on. I usually forget something to mention, and Kelly usually reminds me. Kelly, anything I'm forgetting? So we have our seminar coming up in August, and I'm so excited about this one because I like to call it our homecoming because it's in Mississauga. We started our first seminar in Mississauga, and we used to have them twice a year. I still remember the first one, Kelly, at Star. And now we're going to be at the Mississauga Grand, which is great because we need a much larger space. So if you would like information about the seminar, I will post that beneath this chat as well. It's going to be a great day, 3 workshops. We just signed the dotted line with an amazing keynote who's going to really talk about taking the leap from a 9-to-5 to entrepreneurship. So it's going to be really good for people who are really considering jumping into that full-time entrepreneur realm. And we're, of course, going to have wonderful speakers on sales. We'll have Julie Flipping. She loves speaking about that sales conversation, and she is really good at it. And we'll also have Office of Small and Medium Enterprises talking about trying to do business with the government. And a new person on our roster, we have Natasha Mitchell, and she is really going to wow you. Just wait for it. It's going to be really good. So there's that. And then, of course, we have our 2 Immigrant Women's Small Business Expos coming up in Toronto and in Ottawa. So those 2 events will be, they're quite a feat. I exhale as I talk about them because it's quite a bit of work putting them together, but it is so worth it. I wouldn't be doing it if it wasn't worth it. So yes, I think that's everything that I really have to mention, but also please do ask your questions. Comment on the screen. Between myself and Kelly, we're trying to field all the questions and get them to Andrea so that she can answer them. we are doing this chat in different locations, which is, it's good and it's bad. It's comfortable because Andrea's able to be in her office and I'm able to be in mine at home. And Kelly's able to be in hers. She's the behind the scenes guru. She makes us all look pretty and seamless. Thank you, Kelly. And yes, so I will interject again closer to the end, and I'll hand it back over to Andrea.
Great. So I just want to continue on that same line of contracts. So we talked a little bit about having contracts in place for your business. And I just wanted to take a little bit of time and touch on what happens when you have to sign a contract, when you were given a contract by someone else to sign. First thing, you never need to feel rushed to sign on the spot. And I know that's easier said than done, because especially when you're now starting and you're really hungry for clients, and especially if it's a big client and it could mean a lot to your company, and just looking at the dollar amount, you may feel pressure to sign. But it certainly will not hurt you. And if anything, will cause you to rise in the estimation of the person who's across from the table. If you say, this is a really great opportunity, I'm going to give it the consideration, the thought that it deserves because of its seriousness. And take some time to really carefully read through it. And you want to look, the same things that are important when you're drafting contracts for other people, you want to make sure that you are signing something that is fair to both of you. So you want to look at what the scope of the work is, what it is that you're being hired to do. Is it clear? Because vague language is what makes lawyers rich. Because in vague language, the more that is kicked to the can, the more, when you start to see phrases as to be determined by the parties, to be determined later, or upon mutual agreement by the parties, whenever something is kicked off to later, now there are legitimate situations where there's nothing you can do about that, but as much as is possible, you want to have things really clear in the contract, especially what it is that you are required to do and what it is that your party to the contract is required to do. You want to look at the time that's available to accomplish what it is. You want to look at the term of the contract. How long is it for? If it is that you're paying someone else, say for a marketing service or a coaching agreement, how long is it for? Is it for a year and it's fixed and you can't come out of it? I've had clients who've signed marketing or advertising contracts where in the fine print it says, this contract is for 3 years and cannot be canceled under any circumstances. Like, it doesn't matter if you're no longer in business, it just doesn't matter. That contract is for the period of time that they've said it's for, and the only way that you can get out of it is to pay the remainder of the contract, similar to a phone agreement. Except the cancellation clause is everything else that's owing on the contract. So that's important. What are the terms for cancellation? So again, if it is that you're the person who's going to be responsible for making payments under the contract, you want to look at how long you have to cancel, if at all, whether you get all of your money back if you pay down the service, whether there's an administration fee, whether there are any types of fees that will reduce your refund. And if you're the person who is going to be providing the services under the contract, you have to think about will it affect your business if this person cancels on you. So if it's a big contract and you've cleared your schedule for the month of August to be able to provide this particular service, and you allow that person, or the contract says the person can cancel on 24 hours notice, and so July 31st, the beginning of July 31st, they say, oh, I've changed my mind. You've turned away 10 other people that could have taken out your services during that month. You now have no income in August. So it's really important to think carefully about each part of that contract and how it affects you in the real world. Contracts often have a lot of legalese, and I understand that legalese makes people's head hurt. And, you know, our profession could probably do better in terms of drafting, in terms of explaining what it is. But it's really important, if you're reading it through and it doesn't make sense, again, go to a lawyer, have someone review it. That is not terribly expensive. Have someone review it and explain to you what this means for you in real terms. You want to look at the payment arrangement. So both if you're the person responsible for payment or if you're the person who's receiving payment, is it going to be a lump sum? Is it going to be over time? Do you have to invoice by a particular date in order to receive payment? I spoke to a young lady recently who discovered in her contract that if she didn't invoice by a particular date, that month of service, the fee for that month of service was forfeited, which I had never seen before. But it just shows the importance of really carefully reading through and making sure that you understand what it really means for your business before you sign off on it. So once you get a contract, don't be intimidated by the size of it or by the legalese. You ask for, and you can give a set time. You can say, I'm going to take 2 business days, or, you know, next Tuesday by end of business. You can give a particular time, but you're going to get back to them. But you owe it to yourself and to your business to ensure that what you're signing, you understand, and it's not going to be disastrous for your business. So that's contracts. So they're particular. So that's the sort of a generic client contract. Employee contracts are important. Employee policies are important. So I'll talk a little bit now about building your team, and as you grow, how you build your team and allow that team to build your business and build your dream. And it's really important that you set the right environment for people to flourish in. And the way to have a great environment, or part of the way to have a great environment, is to have really clear policies. So I think unless if you've never been an employee, then, you know, hats off to you for being the brave one. But those of us who've worked for other people in the past, or maybe still working for other people, know that the worst thing in life is to have a boss who does not have clear policies. And on Monday, what you've done is fine. And on Tuesday, it's the worst thing. And on Friday, it's back to being fine. You never know where you stand. And if you do try to do something that's out of the box or creative, your ideas are smashed down. So the best companies are those that create an environment where it's very, very clear. So it's like parenting, right? It's establishing the boundaries so that your child knows, you know, every night at 8 p.m. the screens turn off, and this is non-negotiable. It's much easier to thrive in an environment where there are boundaries than where everything's ad hoc. So one of my pieces of advice to clients who are looking to start a team is to make sure that you think about your policies. And your policies are everything from attendance and timeliness to vacation days and personal days to education and continuing professional development. It's also really important that you have a set procedure if something goes wrong. People who have no procedures are people who get taken to labor board, because what often happens is you have an employee, that employee is getting on your nerves because they've been coming in late. And the first time it happens, you sort of swallow it and you don't say anything, or you say, I really think you need to start, you know, getting up earlier or setting your alarm. And the second time it happens, you sigh again and you say, you know, really, you have to change this. The third or fourth time it happens, you are now pissed off and you say, I'm done, you've got to leave. And understandably so, and you shouldn't have to tell grown people that you should be at work on time. Unfortunately, the law doesn't agree. The law says you need to make it very clear. You need to have a process which says you are required to be at work at 8 a.m. The first time that this happens, you will get a warning, a verbal warning. The second time it happens, you will get a formal letter which will be put in your file. And the third time that it happens, you are subject to termination. If you follow those procedures and you get to the third time, it's very difficult for someone to have a claim against you because it was clear from the very beginning what would happen if they came to work late 3 times. It's in the absence of the policies and in the absence of the procedures that you open yourself up to liability. So the contract is important, but I would almost say that the policies are more important than the contract. And you can include the policies by reference in your employee contract. But really, it's the policies that make or break, both from a legal point of view in terms of protecting you, but also just from a practical business point of view. Employees who know where they stand and know exactly what they are required to do and are trained on it are much more likely to be productive employees than those who have to flounder around and never know, what works today may not work tomorrow. Or what works for one employee doesn't work for the other who's the boss's favorite. So taking the personal and the personality out of it and having objective criteria for your employees will make life easier for you, will make it less likely that you'll be sued, and will also make your employees hopefully more productive. We spoke a little bit earlier about independent contractors and the difference between an independent contractor and an employee. And this often comes up with people who run beauty salons or hairdressers, because sometimes they straddle the line. So generally, the general rule is an employee is someone who has to come to work at a particular time. You can tell them, you have complete control over how they perform their job. You can tell them when to come up, when to come in, when to go home, house job, which tools to use. You provide all of the tools that they need, all of the information, all the document, whatever they need to perform the job, you provide it. That's an employee. And an employee will normally only work for you, or at least in that particular position. An independent contractor is essentially another business, just in the form of an individual. And that person contracts with you to perform the job, but you don't have any control over how he performs it. You can't necessarily say you need to be at my office between 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. That person will provide their own tools. So if it's, if a subcontractor, for example, in construction, the electrician will bring his own drill and his own wires and screwdrivers. The more you blur the lines between the two of them, the more likely, because the courts tend to err on the side of finding that the person is an employee. So it's really important to be clear who they are. Quite often people will want to have independent contractors because they're easier, right? You don't have to pay CPP and EI and take out taxes. You cut them a check every 2 weeks or on invoice, and that's it. But you have to be really careful that you're not paying someone as an independent contractor who really is an employee. You have to question, if it's really important for me to control how this person works, I need them to be here at a particular time, I need them to dress in uniform and all the rest of it. It's important to make sure that you're hiring them under the right format. I understand that there's a question from Janelle who would like to discuss the effects of the Human Rights Tribunal versus the Labor Board. That's fairly broad, but yeah, the Human Rights Tribunal is specifically with it's your civil liberties, it's your Bill of Rights. And so the Human Rights Tribunal will hear things with respect to discrimination. So if you have an employee who thinks that you've discriminated against them on the basis of their race or their gender or sexual orientation or disability or any other of the protected fields, then that person can take it to the Human Rights Tribunal. And they're not always so when we think of Human Rights Tribunal, we think of really egregious cases. But sometimes it's as simple as, people have been taken to the Human Rights Tribunal for not providing rooms for women who are returning after maternity leave to pump milk in, or having company events that are only available in bars, and that is a problem for employees whose religious beliefs prohibit them from being in those places. So it really is more on the basis of discrimination, whereas the labor board tends to deal more with labor rights issues. So if you are infringing on the employee's right to have a break, or the employee's right to paid overtime, or to have a certain number of hours off after working for a certain number of hours for safety reasons. So generally, the difference between those two. If I haven't answered the question, please ask again. But that's sort of a broad answer to that. Does anyone else have any questions about employees? Is there anyone out there who is in the process of taking on employees and wants to discuss any of the challenges that they're having? Okay. So then I'll talk a little bit more about intellectual property. So we touched on trademarks and a little bit of copyright. Trademarks, and I just wanted to make clear, because quite often people will say, and it's completely understandable, that you register your business name. So you register, Andrea's wonderful hair, and you register your business name, and you start providing that service. And when it comes time to trademark, you realize someone else already has trademarked that name, and you go, how is this possible? I registered my business name, I own my business name. Well, how has someone else trademarked it? Because our government has decided that the trademark database and the trademark register is separate from the business name register. And so, yes, if you own a business name, you own that name on the business name register. Doesn't mean it's trademarked. And so when you're starting a business, it's important to do a search. And you can go, I'll put it up after in the comments. There's the Canadian Intellectual Property Office, or CIPO. You can go and do a search. You don't need to pay a lawyer to do it if it's just the name. You can go and do a search to see whether anyone has already applied or already been granted a trademark of the name that you intend to carry on your business under, or the name that you intend to distinguish yourself in the marketplace. The other thing is, trademarks are a protection, but there are other types of protection as well. So simply by having used your business name for a long period of time, you have a right at common law to use that name. And if someone says to you, well, I challenge it, I've been using it for 2 years, and you can say, well, no, I've actually been using it for 5 years, and I've been on TV, and it's all over my website, and everyone knows this business by this name. You do have a right at law to be protected. The difficulty with trademarks and not having it registered is that you have to prove that you've been using it. And that becomes difficult, especially if the other person has been using it at the same time, and your paths just didn't cross. And so the advantage of having it registered is that the government then basically stamps and says, no, you are the owner, you've been the owner since X date, and no one else can use it. And that is a clear line in the sand, as opposed to having to go back and forth in a court battle over who used it first. I see that there is a question waiting. Waiting?
Yes. So I don't know if everyone can hear me yet, because I can't really hear
Yes.
yet. But I had a question going back to the employee agreements. So how do you differ your agreements when it is a full-time employee versus a volunteer versus an intern versus, let's say, for my sake, I have a committee that is going to help with a certain task.
Yeah.
How
does that differ?
Yeah.
Right. So you can have So there's a difference between, you can have a part-time employee and you can have a short-term employee. So you can have an employee for a week. If for that week you are in complete control over that person's mode of work. So the contract for a short-term employee or a part-term employee would look very similar to a full-time employee. It's just the length of the contract would be different, and you wouldn't be responsible for, so in Ontario, you're not eligible for actual vacation leave until you've worked a full year of work. Companies can make a decision to change that, but you're only eligible for a year for a vacation after you've worked for a year. But even when I was in law school, I learned this, it sort of blew my mind, but even if you've worked for someone for 2 weeks, you accrue vacation pay. So you accrue vacation pay from the very day that you start working at whatever rate it is. And that rate is multiplied by the number of days and the number of weeks that you've worked. And as an employer, you have to provide that vacation pay, even though the person's not eligible for vacation. So in a lot of respects, your responsibilities towards a short-term or a part-time employee will be the same as a full-time employee. A volunteer and an intern are sort of a hybrid beast because they're not really an independent contractor. They don't have their own business. And a volunteer isn't making any money at all. And an intern is making very little. An intern really is more almost like an apprenticeship or a training. So there are separate agreements for interns and volunteers that are different from both employee and independent contractor because they don't have the same sort of established rights under the law, because it's understood that it's a different relationship, that they're getting more than just a paycheck or a commission check or a payment. If you're an independent contractor, they're getting more out of it. They're getting training, they're getting exposure, and in some respects, it's almost like you're doing them a favor in a sense, to allow them to have this exposure and this experience. So you don't have the same obligations. You won't, you're not responsible for EI and CPP and vacation and all those things for interns and certainly not for volunteers. So it would be a separate agreement, and it would just be clear that they're not employees, that they are volunteers. And volunteer and intern agreements tend to do a lot more with making sure that they don't, so you don't have a lot of responsibilities under it, except to pay them if it's an intern. And a volunteer, you don't even have to do that. Some of them, if you have an intern or volunteer work in an environment where it's dangerous, you may want to put in an obligation on the part of the company to provide insurance for them, but generally you'll have that anyway. But for interns and for volunteers, it's really important that you have non-disclosure agreements and confidentiality agreements, because those are people who are not with your organization long-term, but they can get a lot of information about your organization or your business while they're with you. And you certainly do not want them using that either for themselves or worse, to take it to a competitor the next year when they go on the next internship and provide that information.
With the agreement especially for non-disclosure, is it acceptable to do something in terms of I just want to say a Google Doc and have a check mark of you agree not to share ... and they have their name, and is that
you can form contracts in lots of different ways. It doesn't need to be the traditional sort of in front of two witnesses and sign it. Once it's clear that they've had an opportunity to review it, and whether it's a check mark or click a button to indicate that they agree. So we've, like, all of us who like Apple stuff, right? We've seen the terms and conditions. No one ever reads it, but at the end, you've got to check, right? Well, you know that otherwise you're not going to get your update, so you do it anyway. But so you check and you say, I agree, and you can't proceed to the next step until you've indicated your acceptance of the terms and conditions. So you can have something like that. And I'm glad you raised that, because that's good in terms of a broader thing of contracts. So yeah, it's really difficult for businesses to get, to take a contract that's this thick and say, hey, can you sign this? Like, you're not going to have any clients because no one wants to deal with that. But there are other ways of bringing it to their attention. And that's one of them. Having it on your website and your terms and conditions. If you're an online business where people need to click before they can proceed to purchase or book an appointment or whatever else the next step is, to make sure that they've seen it. The other thing, you can incorporate your terms and conditions, your agreement, by reference. So if you are a business and you have a website, and say, I'm going to use the example of a general contractor or a person who does home renovations, and they have really specific contracts that they need, and they do differ from client to client, but there's some basic, there are some basic things that they need to do. You can have your quote and say, if you go to our website at X link, you'll find our full terms and conditions. By signing this quote, you agree to be bound by the terms and conditions on that website. So that way the client isn't intimidated by a whole, 15 pages of document, but you've covered, your ask by making sure that they've seen it and they've ticked to say that they agree to it. That went really, really, really fast.
That was Alex. You have such great content. You are packed full of knowledge, and it's stuff that everyone wants to know. So remember that everyone, you can still comment under all this. Andrea can answer questions. She can type in and out. So
exactly, I'll be checking the comments, and I'll be there to answer questions if anyone has them. And Andrea will put up the specials and the links. What I did want to say really quickly was that, in response to so many questions about sort of the building blocks of making sure that your legal foundation is set up, I'm going to be launching a product specifically for Canadian small businesses. That's exactly that. It's a secure startup, and it's going to be a step-by-step with all the advice and the documents that you need to make sure that your business is protected and that you don't end up in court. So if you sign up for the email list, you'll get not only legal tips that I don't share anywhere else, but you'll be the first to know when that's available, and you'll also get special pricing for being on the broadcast.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Andrea. This was really an eye-opener. I feel like I need to go and sit down and write a list of all the contracts. More work. But it's okay. It's something that needs to happen. Really, really does, because I think we are a little bit too trusting with our businesses that we've all worked so hard for. So definitely great content. I am so happy that you were able to take the time out of your evening to do this for us, and we very much appreciate it. And I will definitely, we'll post everything on beneath this chat, how to get through to Andrea. And thank you, Vistaprint, as well, for making all this possible. We'll post some links with some Vistaprint deals on this chat as well, with a promo code that you can use to get 20% off. And yeah, we'll post more details. And remember to tell us what you're doing for Canada Day. Happy 150 to everyone. I don't have a flag to wave. Well, there's a flag right there, kind of, sort of. We'll go with that. But yes, have a great night. Thank you again, and Kelly will tell us when we're signed off. Bye.
Bye.